Hi guys, how are you? Hopefully the test was okay. I'm grading them this weekend and they'll be posted by Monday, and then your midterm grades are actually due on Monday night for everybody, so I will get those as well, and you should be able to see them on Tuesday morning. So now we're moving on. We're getting out of this very like heavy calculation based stuff and we're moving into kind of like a whole different ball game. We're going to talk about stats here, still in terms of mathematical concepts. I don't know what that was, but we're going to talk about it in, I don't know, more of like a critical thinking sense. So we're going to get started right now, and we're going to start with 5A. We're going to talk about the fundamentals of statistics. So some pretty interesting stuff in this chapter, I think. I really like this chapter, and I like 5 and 6 are two of my favorites. So, sorry, I'm just checking the video. So, I don't know. Stick with me. We'll see what you think about this. This is more of those kind of, I really need you to like explain yourself kind of questions. There are some different answers, some, I don't know, kind of black and white answers, and some where, you know, they're kind of more opinion based. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Okay, so 5A, number 1, you should have the worksheet. I emailed them to everybody. We're going to talk about number 1 first. So we have to talk about a bunch of definitions, but we'll get there in just a minute. Number 1 in 5A, I'll read through it with you. In order to gauge public opinion on how to handle Iran's growing nuclear program, the Pew Research Center surveyed 1,001 Americans by telephone. They want us to describe the population, the sample, the population parameters, and then the sample statistics. So these are, of course, all new vocabulary words. You may have heard population before, you know, talking about the number of people there are, and you may have heard sample before. So let's talk about those two first. The population is what group are they trying to get information about? What large group are they trying to get information about? So for population, again, what large group population are we looking for info about? And then kind of not the opposite of this, but a subgroup of this will be the sample. So the sample is a representative amount of people from the larger population. So the sample, I'll call it smaller group chosen to represent population. Okay, of course, if we're talking about in this question, it says we want to know, we're talking about public opinion, right? And we're talking about Americans. So if we want to know how all Americans feel, there's no way to survey every single American, of course, right? That's not going to make sense. And matter of fact, in number 1, they surveyed 1,001 Americans. So they're choosing just a small subgroup of people to represent a larger group. So in this case, the population in number 1 would be all Americans. So the population would be all Americans. That's the large group that we want to know information about. So what's the sample then? What do you think? The sample would be the 1,001 Americans. Sorry, I know this whiteboard's a little shaky. Americans that they chose, that they surveyed. Okay? Great. But now, then they also want to talk about population parameters. Oh no, where'd my eraser go? Oh, there it is. They want to talk about population parameter and sample statistics. And remember, you can always pause this video if you're like still trying to write notes or anything like that. The best thing about the online part of the classes is you can kind of take the videos and the class portion of it at your own pace. So let's say they don't give us like a hard number for sample statistics. The next part of this is the sample statistic. So out of that sample, what number of people, let's say in this case, agree with how we're handling Iran's growing nuclear program. So the sample statistic, I'm a terrible speller, is, how would I word that? So maybe number out of the population sorry, not out of the population, out of the sample. Sample statistic. The number out of the sample that, in this case, I'm just going to say agrees or disagrees. Agrees, or you could say disagrees if we're talking about a different group. Disagrees with the survey. So let's just say, again, they don't give us a number, but let's say out of these 1,001 people that they called on the phone, let's just say 600 of them said, yes, we're handling this well. So we would say for the sample statistic that, and again, this is just an example, that 600 out of 1,001 people agree with the, that's agree, holy mackerel, that does not look like agree. Agree with the way it's being handled. Handled. Okay, so this right here would be the sample statistic. Okay, so let's talk about what the population parameter is. The population parameter is then we take the actual raw data from the sample and we spread that out kind of. We're saying, okay, well, if 600, I'm going to go over here for a minute. If 600 out of 1,001 people agree, what percentage is that? That's about, if you do the math, it's about 59.9%. So the 59.9% would be the population parameter. Okay, so we're taking the actual numbers that we got from the sample, and we're using those numbers to represent all Americans. So of course we can only survey this small group, this small sample. And out of the people that we surveyed, okay, so we said 600 out of 1,001. I just made up the number 600. Agree with the way it's being handled. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to get a percentage then. And I'm going to use that sample percentage to represent the whole larger group. And that's my population parameter. Okay, so this is the number we got to represent larger group. I'm really running out of room. I thought I was out of room. Let me make sure you can see that. Yeah. Okay, so the sample statistic is the numbers, the data that you actually get from the sample. And then the population parameter is how you take this and you just generalize it and you say, okay, well then we'll say about, say 59.9% or about 60% of Americans agree with the way this is being handled. Let's go through number 2. Let me erase. Go ahead and read through number 2. I'm going to read through it too. The Higher Education Research Institute conducts an annual study of attitudes of incoming college students by surveying approximately 214,000 first-year students at 340 colleges and universities. Okay, there are approximately 1.4 million first-year college students in this country. Again, they want us to describe the population, the sample, the population parameters, and the sample statistics. So what do you think the population is? The population is the large group that we want to represent. So you could say either all first-year college students, you could say incoming college students, you could say 1.4 million first-year college students. Any of those answers would be correct. The population is either 1.4 million, or you could say all incoming college students. It's the big group we want to talk about. The big group we want to gather information about. Okay, well then what's the sample? Well, the sample has to be the smaller group they chose to represent the population. And later on, we're going to talk about different ways to choose the sample. There are different ways that work better or more fairly, maybe. And as we go through, I think actually this worksheet, we'll look at a couple of those ways and why some are better than others are more fair. The sample in this one, though, is what? You're at home and you're like, it's this. People are like, who are you talking to? It's the 214,000 students surveyed, right? Surveyed. Okay. That's right. Okay. Again, they don't say, okay, out of this 214,000, 100,000 of them agree or they're happy about going to college. Okay, they don't say that. But they could say, all right, for the sample statistic, my dog is sitting outside the door wanting to come in. For the sample statistic, I'm going to say, because I already did the math on it, okay, out of 214,000 incoming college students, 180,000 of them are excited about going to college. Okay, so again, I just made up that 180,000 number. 180,000 of the 214,000, I just made this number up. They don't give us a number right now. Incoming students are excited. Okay, that would be the sample statistic. If they said a certain number, they didn't, I just made one up. Okay. So then what's the population parameter? Well, you would use this data that you actually got when you did the survey, or the survey from the sample, and you would come up with a number that represents, okay, all college students. If you divide these two numbers, if you say this is part of this, you get about 84% of incoming college students are excited. All right, I'm going to look at number 3 now. If you have any questions, again, just email me. I think I've been doing pretty well with responding to emails in a pretty timely fashion. Again, if you email me at like 6 in the morning, unfortunately I don't usually wake up until around 9. That's just my schedule because I work until midnight usually, so I stay up a little later. But I try to get to you as soon as I possibly can. I know it's hard not having like the actual in-class stuff. This is number 3. Number 3 and number 4 are the same, so we'll just do number 3. And if you want to do number 4 on your own to make sure you understand it, again, you can always send me a screenshot of it, and I can look over and say, this looks good, maybe change this looks good. I'm happy to do that for you. Same thing, just send me an email, or you can send me a text too. Whatever works the best. All right, number 3 and 4 below it says, describe how you would apply the 5 basic steps of a statistical study to the given issues. Okay, describe how you would apply them. Give me 1 second, I want to look at my notebook. Oh yeah, I did, okay. I just remembered I have to send this to you too, but by the time you watch this, you probably will already have this. So again, on this chart, it gives us the 5 basic steps in a statistical study right at the top there. And if you don't have this chart, now you have it on video and everything. It's a little blurry though. And you can see, start, identify your goals, get your population, draw from the population. There's your sample. Collect the data, summarize. Those are your sample statistics. Make inferences about the population, okay? Come up with that percentage. That gives you your population parameter, and then draw a conclusion. Ooh, that was some shaky video work. So let's look at number 3 together. A supermarket manager wants to determine whether the variety of products in her store meets customers' needs. Okay, so let's use our, you can use either one. Probably I'd start up here. Let's use the 5 steps and go through it. So first, state the goal of your study. I can't write and read at the exact same time. That is, determine the population you want to study and exactly what you want to learn about it. So what's the goal of this study? Well, she wants to see if her customers are happy with the products, right? She wants to know if they're happy with the selection. If you don't know what the goal of a study is, it's like impossible to do the study, right? It's just like when you have a question in math, if you don't know what you're looking for, well, how are you going to find the answer, right? You can plug in numbers to equations all day, but if you're like, wait, what am I trying to solve for again? Right? So that's what they're trying to get you to see here. You need a goal. Step number 2, choose a representative sample from the population. Okay, well, depends on the size of the grocery store, right? Maybe she could ask, if it's a tiny little corner store, maybe she could ask 50 customers. If it's big, huge Hannaford in Portland, maybe they could ask 1,000 customers. It depends. Okay, so I said, all right, ask, it's a medium-sized grocery store, ask 500 shoppers if they're happy with the products. So number 2, choose a sample. I said, ask 500 shoppers if they're happy with the products. I just picked this number. Again, it depends on the size of the grocery store. If it's a tiny grocery store, you're probably not going to ask 500 people. You might not even see 500 people in, a month. So do that. So number 3 says collect raw data from the sample and summarize these data by finding sample statistics. Okay, so this one might be as simple as saying, are you happy with the products we offer here? And we'll talk about later more about samples and how we get them and what's a fair way to get them, a non-biased way to get them. We'll talk about that more in this section. So let's collect raw data. You may do a survey. What else could you do if you wanted to ask these people? You could, of course, just ask them, right? You could send out an email. You ever see those surveys at the bottom of your receipts? Win a $500 gift card. If you fill out this survey, you could do that. An email, you could do like a text, I don't know, something like that. What other ways could you get a sample? Think of some. Those are all pretty good ways to do it. So collect raw data. I said you could survey them. With an email. You could mail out a survey. Okay. So let's collect the data. I'm going to say actually, that means CTUALLY, actually do the survey. Okay, so we said you could email, mail, receipt, I before E, except after C, receipt, something like that. Okay, let's collect the data now. So what did we find? Well, we found 400 out of 500 people. I'm just picking that number. 400 out of 500 people are happy. 400 out of 500 are happy. We found that data. Okay, great. So if we're following the steps at the top, we're collecting and we're summarizing them by finding a sample statistic. That would be this, right? 400 out of 500 are happy. Now we have to use that to infer something about all of the grocery store shoppers, all of the customers at this store. You could say, what percentage are happy? Okay. You could say about 80% of shoppers. Oops, sorry, I didn't write the title for number 4, which is what do they call it in your notes? They tell you to infer population parameters. So we could say 80% of shoppers, I'm gonna run out of room again, are happy. Okay, great. 80% of the shoppers are happy. You might say that's most of the shoppers. You might say that's the majority of the shoppers. That's a good amount of the shoppers. And depending on what your goals are as a grocery store owner, you might want 90% to be happy, or you might be like, good, it's more than 75%, we're happy. So that's just something to think about. It depends on what your personal goal is, not this goal, for your store. Number 5 is to draw conclusions, determine what you learned and whether you achieved your goal. Draw conclusions. Okay, I might say, if I'm this grocer, I'd probably say most people are happy. Most people are happy, and so I'm happy too. And we're going to talk about the words more and most and many and the majority and all that good stuff coming up too. So that's number 5. Sorry, question number 3. Those are steps 1 through 5. And you could say, okay, well, what about that other 20%? Why aren't they happy? And maybe you want to do a whole new survey just for those folks. Maybe. All right, I'm going to pause the video here. This is part 1 of 5A, and there will be a part 2 coming up shortly. Thanks, guys.